want to welcome Council Lady Allen of the Planning, Zoning, Planning, Zoning, and Historical. Where does that come from? Mr. Forcum, Councilman Forcum, good to see you. I want to welcome you, and as we begin, I think you weren't here when I read the initial question, Director, so you have the opportunity to hear my good speech for the night. As stewards of taxpayer dollars, members of council have been charged with ensuring the public funds and are used in an effective, efficient manner, delivering maximum services to the citizens of Nashville. If your budget includes an increase, could you please present the council how your additional funds will improve these services? If no additional increase of funding, how your department will sustain the level of service that you are now providing. And with that, you can introduce your associates, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman. To my right is Chairman McLean. He's the chairman of the Metro Planning Commission. To my left is Deputy Director Bob Lehman. Bob helps with the operations of the office, budget, and human resources. Sitting in the gallery, we have with us actually, I believe she's over here, Carrie Logan, who's the Assistant Director of Special Projects. She's dealing with, as many of you know, the affordable and workforce housing, grants coordination, council legislation, and zoning code amendments. Jeffrey Leach is our finance officer. He's here to your right, and in the gallery is Brandon Burnett. He's the division manager for land development. Catherine Withers, the division manager for community plans and design studio. And Jennifer Higgs, she is the division manager for GIS and mapping. And we also have Greg Claxton here with us, who is helping us as we begin the process of changing how we manage the capital improvements budget, which I know many of you are interested in. We do have improvements that are proposed for our budget this year, our operating budget. They include 4 new positions. Those positions, 2 of which deal with the aforementioned capital improvements budget. The 2 positions, one is a planning manager and one of them is a planner 1. The other 2 positions are one planner to go into the community plans and one to go into land development. The 2 that will work in the capital improvements budget office, essentially, that we'll have, these 2 positions are to help us increase increase the efficiencies of how the capital improvements budget works. In years past, the Planning Commission has worked more as a pass-through than actually doing an analysis and working with the departments to both co-locate projects when we know that there are opportunities, say, to bring schools and libraries together, or I know that right now the General Services is working on the Family Justice Center and the police station, but there are opportunities that we've lost in years past by not co-locating these services, and we hope through the CIB to identify where projects exist that we can put together. There's also the opportunity when we're doing infrastructure projects to marry those projects together, whether they're with water services and public works or other departments. But in the past, we haven't had one department looking at everyone's capital improvement budgets and figuring out ways to bring those together. And so that's one big piece that we hope to do and present it to this council in a way that's easily digestible. We're making a first run at it this year, but we hope to do much better in the coming year. To do that, we need to meet with council members to understand the capital improvements projects that you're interested in your districts, to meet with the departments to understand how they arrived at their capital improvements projects, and also to start looking for grants. While most of our departments go out and seek grants, what doesn't happen all that often, it does happen some, but not all that often, is looking for grants that, once again, touch on multiple disciplines within metropolitan government. And we think that with these 2 positions, we'll also have the opportunity to do that. That is certainly a change in the process and why we're looking for those 2 positions. The other 2 positions, as I mentioned, are in community plans and land development. The community plans position will allow us to be more responsive to the community regarding changes that are happening throughout our county. I don't have to tell any of you district council members about that. And then also the land development position will actually be assigned to our front counter. And our front counter works as much as a triage as anything else, but it works within the one-stop shop and helps to move projects along our process quicker. And so we believe that by putting another planner down there will help a lot, not only by having them there at that front counter, but right now we have two positions that are at the front counter at all times, but one of them is one of our regular planners that's also reviewing plans, and they have to rotate through. And that kills about a day or a day and a half of each one of those planners each week. So we're hoping to have another full-time position down there. Also, I want to point out that we are suggesting increasing our fees, and that increase, when we look at the number of permits that we're issuing, the number of reviews that we're doing since 2015, we believe that this will net additional revenues of $800,000. And with that, Chairman, I open it to any questions.
Thank you, Director. The floor is open, members of council, to anyone that have any questions for the Director. We're going to have the chair speak first.
Thank you. Two quick questions. I noticed that there was a $2 million decrease in the MPO funding, and I have learned that we are the fiscal body that does the MPO. Is that reflective of decrease in activity? My understanding is they're so involved in the transit stuff that I would expect that to at least stay level. Do we know what that is about?
Yeah, I believe they just finished a regional plan, and so they're not using those funds. Obviously, they've just completed it, so
Gotcha.
That's why there's a reduction.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is, several very thoughtful neighbors have asked me this repeatedly, and I think this is a great opportunity to have a good answer for them. With this new position to look at the capital improvement budget, to look between departments, one of the biggest questions that comes up to me is how, as we implement the policies of Nashville Next and say we want to put density on the corridors, is there a comprehensive way for us to proactively address improving the capacity of the corridors before the density gets there? And is that something that can be worked into the capital improvement budget?
Well, that actually is, you've honed in on one of the key issues that we want to use this process to address, and that is how we spend our funds where they're focused. And during Nashville Next, we identified the different tier centers, Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 centers. And what we want to make sure that we're doing is that the infrastructure improvements that we're focused on match that priority. If we believe that Tier 1 centers are going to have the highest density and the most growth, then we should make sure that our capital improvements budget matches that and begins focusing infrastructure improvements in those areas. Now, that's not to say that we wouldn't do it in other areas as well, but we just want to make sure that the capital improvements budget reflects that, and that those areas are seeing allocations that match the level of development that we expect in those areas.
Great. I think
So
that's
that
money
is a
well
big
spent.
key.
Excellent. I support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Director. The fee increase, sort of the logic behind that, is the recommended fee level, is that based on research as to what other cities are charging currently for the same type of services? Or how was that fee, what's the thought behind the specific numbers in the fee increase?
The methodology that we use to get to these numbers. There was a Maximus study done almost a decade ago now. 2007. There was a Maximus study done that looked at fees, and they looked at other cities' fees, but it also really focused in on meeting with the department and understanding how much manpower is used to process each one of these applications, and then try to come up with a fee amount that recovered the cost of those resources that are being spent processing those applications. So that's the first thing. We started there. Then we took those numbers and we increased them by the rate of inflation to bring them up to 2017 numbers. Then we looked a little bit closer at some of the fees and how we believe the resources have evolved since that study was done. As an example, we've broken down SPs so that there's not just one SP fee. Today, if you were just a property owner that needed to do, say you own a pizza restaurant and you wanted to do an expansion on your deck, to have additional tables, but for whatever reason that didn't really meet the base zoning and you needed to come in and get a specific plan approved to get that done. Well, you would get charged the same fee as the Bridgestone if Bridgestone wanted to come in and for whatever reason needed an SP for their tower downtown. It was the same fee. Clearly not the same amount of resources being spent to evaluate those two applications. And so one of the things that we also did, in addition to what I've already mentioned, was to look at more closely at how we broke those fees down and see if there wasn't a way to be a little more sensitive to that so that we weren't increasing fees for small applications in the same manner that we were for some of the larger applications that do eat up an awful lot of our resources.
Councilor Dow.
Thank you. I'm glad to see that we're getting some more resources in planning. I had one quick question to ask. Last year, we budgeted a position for a planner to be a liaison or work directly, like the council person's planning person. Now, is that included in this resource proposal, or do we get our person back? I was just trying to figure out how that works.
That person's still there. Mm-hmm. We have a person that, and a person is really not right, as you all know. Different people will work with you on different issues. I do want to point that this raises another question that I should have addressed at the beginning. And I know that there's been legislation that the council is looking at. I'm not sure if it's been filed yet or not, to increase the number of rezonings that each council member could do, and that Metro essentially covers the cost of. And we've looked at the amount that we're given to cover for notices and for signs and the amount of resources. And Bob, you correct me, but I believe the last time we ran the numbers that we believe that we wouldn't need any additional funds, that the amounts that we asked for one rezoning, it turned out there weren't as many as we anticipated, and that we think that if it does go to 3, that we could absorb that with the current budget that we have.
And with the resources you have? I know that, like in the past, we were a little resource challenged, especially in districts when we were wanting to implement UDOs and so forth. We were kind of competing for resources. So the resources you've outlined today, you think are sufficient to cover the demand for the upcoming year and so forth?
I do, Council Lady, and I'll tell you one of the struggles that we have, and something that my time at the Planning Commission that I've just come to terms with, is that the planners and the job that they do for the city, by its very nature, creates a situation where we have a lot of turnover. Young planners come in, we were guessing at the age of our average planner, and it's probably in the early 30s, but they get out of, and quite a number of them have gotten out of grad school, and they come to work for us and spend a few years really learning the code, learning the policies, learning how development works in Nashville. And we simply are never going to be able to pay them what they're going to be able to make in the marketplace. And so we always have a turnover that's going on. And to that point, I would tell you that right now we are down 4 positions. Mm-hmm. We have 4 open positions right now that we're trying to fill, that we're in the process of filling. But that's a normal state of being in the planning department, and that there is just this continuous turnover. So we're never really fully staffed. So I think that also these positions, getting the additional position, 2 positions we're talking about, will help us get closer to being staffed at a level where we're able to be more responsive to the community and to the council.
You think the additional resources is a better use versus retaining the experience of the people you have and paying them more to keep them?
Well, Council, and that's what I was saying. I kind of finally had to come to terms with the fact that we would never be able to pay them at the rate that the private sector is going to pay. That would be so disproportionate. And even then, quite frankly, I think that they get the itch to get out there and get into the development stream. I think some of these positions are simply stepping stones to other positions. Like I said, I think 95% have undergraduate degrees, another 67% have postgraduate degrees. These are people that are pretty driven, and I'm not sure that the city's going to put together that focus the kind of salary amounts that would keep them there, the full slate of people there long term. We have a lot of people who enjoy what we do at the city and enjoy just the work that we do for the city, and we'll be lucky to keep a lot of them over time, but there's always going to be, I think, a high rate of turnover.
And I know Councilman Palmer probably killed me on this, but I wanted to ask about the one-stop shop, like as far as like cost and operations, is that working? Do you think we're getting any cost savings there by consolidating all of the various, places to go in one location and serving the people fast? I wanted to know if that's more cost efficient and more effective, having that one-stop shop now. And the reason I asked, because I was down there several times and I saw like the line of people, and you actually addressed it about adding more staff at the counter. So do you think that will solve some of the backlog? And do you think that one-stop shop is a good cost savings for us and good bang for the buck?
I absolutely do. I think what you've identified is the need for resources in the one-stop shop. Not that it's not effective. I think it's extraordinarily effective. And you know who it's effective for is the fictional business that I pointed out, the pizza store owner, right? That doesn't do land development, that doesn't understand that they can come to one location and find out everyone they need to meet with right there, and they're not driving around. The sophisticated developers, if we spread them out throughout the entire county, they're still going to be able to work their way through the system. But it's the small business owner, I think, is the big winner with this one-stop shop. And I would also say that the departments are the big winner. It helps for codes to sit right next to planning and for us to each to hear and water services next to public works. And we're hearing each other's regulations, and we're understanding how it all fits together. And I think that we've all brought some efficiencies to our processes by hearing that. I can't tell you the number of conversations that I have in a week with Codes Department, and the proximity of our inspectors and our inspectors, but the people processing the applications from the various departments. The conversation happen weekly where we think of better ways to do things. And it wouldn't happen if we didn't have the one-stop shop.
Thank you. Councilman Sledge.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to everyone from the department who's here. I and the commission, I wanted to give one note of appreciation. The department worked very diligently on a grant that was just awarded this week from the National Endowment for the Arts regarding two neighborhoods in the district I represent, Wedgwood, Houston, and Chestnut Hill, about the impact, the economic impact of the arts and maker spaces and residents, and also is working on a community engagement process for that. And I wanted to really thank y'all. I know that y'all worked very hard on that, and while it wasn't quite the amount I think we initially asked for, to be included in that list is pretty significant. So thank you for that. And on that note, when it comes to sort of the community engagement processes that are occurring past Nashville Next, can you talk a little bit, and this may be my ignorance, when I look through the program, it looks like there's still some sort of, I don't know if it's a line item or what it is, where it talks about Nashville Next. Is there still funding that occurs for, are we still doing something that's under the heading of Nashville Next, I guess is the best way to put it?
Yes, Councilman, we are. So Nashville Next generated how many action items? Greg? Over 200 action items. We were ambitious. And so one of the things that we're doing is trying to implement those action items. And then also we plan to hold ourselves accountable and do an annual evaluation. Which action items have we addressed? Which ones have we not addressed? What are we doing to move towards those action items? And continue to engage the community on those issues. So that is a big piece of what we're continuing to do. Also, through Nashville Next, we're still working with with MTA and RTA, because that's mass transit is a big piece of what Nashville Next talked about. I do want to take this moment, and second thing I was remiss in bringing up at the beginning was the fact that I hope that most of you know that the American Planning Association gave Nashville their highest award for the general plan for Nashville Next. And very happy to see that Rick Bernhardt was able to stop on his motorcycle ride out west to be with us to pick up the trophy.
Thank you. Director, there's no other council members in the queue, so that concludes your presentation.
I will
Thank
run.
you for being here. Thank you, Commissioner, for being here.